So this is a tutorial for the Firefox add-on moz-rewrite. Before we get started, I'll just quickly discuss the environment. As you can see, this is it's a VirtualBox image of Windows 7 taken from modern.ie. They distribute images for testing different versions of Internet Explorer, so I figured I'd use a very clean environment. We're going to start from absolute scratch. Alright, that's not entirely true. I already created a portable apps directory and downloaded a few things, but I'll show you where those came from. I just wanted to do the downloading ahead of time. Okay, so portableapps.com. Let's click on apps. So, let's see, I have 7-zip. Oh, there it is. Okay, so 7-zip I already downloaded. I'll just show you, if you haven't been on the site before, every page will look like this, and it just says download from SourceForge, and you can see that it points to a paf.exe, which is a portable application. It's basically a self-extracting 7-zip file. 7-zip, also need Notepad++ as a text editor, so I already downloaded that. And of course, we have Mozilla Firefox Portable Edition. So here we have version 3405. So downloaded that, and in addition, we're going to want a binary of wget, and I'll show you where I got that from. The site that I always download my wget from. The blog was started, obviously, a very long time ago with version 1.12, but it's been updated periodically, and the most recent post is October of this year, so wget 116. And you can see it points to a 7-zip file, which is the one that I already downloaded right here. So let's actually unzip that. Start 7-zip real quick. And so we'll just go inside there. All that we need is the executable. We're not going to care about any of the SSL certificates. And just close 7-zip for the moment. Okay, so we just extracted that. Okay, first things first, let's install Firefox. All of these portable apps default to wanting to extract themselves to the portable apps directory, but you can extract them absolutely anywhere that you like. For the moment, we'll just follow that convention. So as you can see, portable apps, and I'll create a directory called Firefox Portable. And there it is. Before I create all of the data, input and output directories and files and stuff, I'll just add the add-on and show you in the preferences exactly what it wants. First, let's shut down Internet Explorer. We're done with that. Okay, load up Firefox. Let's configure it. We'll just set a few basic preferences. Okay, and we're not going to have any add-ons, but we'll just show that. Okay, nothing there. Nothing up our sleeves. And so we're going to go to the GitHub repo for moz-rewrite. It has at the moment, it has 3 variations. It has So there's 3 alternate add-ons. The default one is one that accepts JavaScript input, and that JavaScript is evaluated within. Mozilla has APIs called Sandbox and Eval and Sandbox, and basically it lets you evaluate JavaScript within a different security I don't know. Basically, the add-on runs with enhanced privileges, and presumably you don't want user input to be able to do anything and everything, so you want to basically run it within it's called a null privilege, null, I forgot the term, but in any case, basically you hand it a bunch of functions. Those are what it can do in addition to just whatever stock JavaScript does, but it doesn't have access to any of the Mozilla APIs, it doesn't have access to the browser window. It's for safety's sake. So, that's the one that's hosted on ammo and addons.mozilla.org, ammo. So, besides the JSON one that I haven't discussed yet, this one here is available here. And so that's version 1.0, which is up to date with the GitHub, the most recent GitHub release, version 1.0. All of the releases, there's only a single page for releases, so all of the different branches which have their own releases show up on a single page, so they're name-spaced in this way. So this is the JavaScript Eval and Sandbox version 1.0. Whereas under it you have the JSON branch version 1.04, and if you scroll down a little bit, you have the JavaScript eval version 2.05. The difference is that the same input JavaScript, the same rules files that are input, one for requests, one for responses, both the JavaScript eval and the JavaScript eval and sandbox, the same input is valid for both of them. The difference is, again, the context within which the JavaScript's evaluated. This one here doesn't use a sandbox. It simply uses the eval statement from within the context that the add-on's JavaScript is executing, which has all the privileges in the world. So that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. It really kind of depends on what you're looking to do. If you want to write user-defined functions that, for example, read input files, write output files, etc., etc., use any of the Mozilla APIs to do pretty much anything you want, then this is actually the guide for you. It's just because it uses eval, it can't be hosted on ammo. They're very strict about that kind of thing. So the other two, the JSON one, which doesn't allow any kind of user-defined functions since JSON itself doesn't support functions. It uses a different, very slightly different input format. Obviously, it's JSON. Right now, we're just going to discuss the JavaScript one because the JSON one is a subset of the JavaScript one, so if we discuss JavaScript thoroughly, then you should be able to understand the JSON one pretty quickly. Alright, so I'm going to install the add-on. And yes, I needed to restart. Okay, so we can close that. And close the releases. While we're on GitHub, I'm actually going to switch to a branch called Recipe Book. There are two recipe books, since there's two different formats of input. One is JavaScript that two of the branches will use, and one is JSON that one of the branch add-ons will use. There's two different recipe books. So we're going to look at the JavaScript recipe book. And actually, we'll just download the and we'll play with these after we get going. And just put it here for the time being. Okay, and well, I guess I'll keep this page open, because there's a ton of documentation and I may want to reference it. But for right now, let's unzip the recipe book. We'll use 7-zip again, just because it's the best. Okay, so it unzipped it here. Let's clean up a little bit. Let's get rid of the zip file. Let's get rid of the 7-zip. wgets 7-zip archive. Okay, so let's take a look at the add-on. So if we look at options, let's just do a really quick overview. We have 3 tabs. 1 tab for input, 1 tab for output, and another tab for utilities, additional things that we can do basically with the output. But let's walk through it. So we have input files. One input file is processed against requests. So you have a checkbox whether or not you want to apply any rules against requests or not. If you just only care about responses but you don't want to touch requests, you would just turn that off. Right now there's no value here. This is just a placeholder. This bracket, prof D bracket, actually let's go back. I'm gonna just show you in the documentation. Okay, so there are 2 ways to specify a file path. You can either browse for it. So this would be the browsing, in which case I'm just going to pick a random file just until I can find, oh, come on. Okay, the filter, it's only looking for JavaScript or text files, so that makes it a little more difficult, but okay, so here's just a text file. Doesn't matter, just browse for anything, click here, so it's the full absolute path to it. So it's convenient, but it's not portable. The idea here, and I'm just going to click OK and accept it so I can go back here and continue looking at the documentation. So you can browse or you can manually enter a path. And basically what's inside of the brackets is meaningful to Mozilla. I added the brackets myself just to make the path, when it's manually entered, easy to parse. So if it starts with a bracket and it contains something meaningful to Mozilla, close bracket and then a relative path after that. So profile directory, current working directory, which is where Firefox is running from. There's a whole mess of them. To be honest, prof D is the only one you're going to want or care about. Sample interpolation values. Just in my testing, I plugged each one of these in and saw what its output was. At the time, I had called the apps. I just called this Firefox, not Firefox Portable. It doesn't matter at all. What does matter is that prof D points to a directory inside of it called data profile. So inside of Firefox Portable, we got data profile. And so if we want to create a namespace within this portable directory, we can just create a new folder. Let's call it moz-rewrite. And so none of this already existed. This is obviously, we're just adding a place for our own configuration files. So in here, we're going to, well, let's refresh my memory. Alright, prop D, moz-rewrite, and so responses, and this would be requests. So let's create those. Add text document. And, well, I'm just going to enter it manually. And I'm just going to use that as a reference. So you got your profile directory. Whether or not you use / or / doesn't matter. The JavaScript actually parses this and splits it into an array of chunks, array of basically directory components. Alright, requests.js. Let's make sure that looks right. Yep, sure enough. And responses. Since we're going to be playing around and testing both of these right now, let's turn on file watching. Right now, each of these has a configuration option for a watch interval. 0 disables it. It's counted in milliseconds, so to click up increments it by 1000 milliseconds by default, so that's 1 second. So let's watch it every, I don't know, say 20 seconds. Well, alright, when you're testing, you should probably use something along, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. Since this is a video tutorial and I don't want to wait 20 seconds maximum as I'm changing things, I'm just going to set it to 5 so you don't have to wait for me. Okay, and really quick, I'm just going to save my settings. Yeah, I'm going to go back in. Oh, I didn't enable that, did I? Okay. Okay, so they're both enabled, they have their paths, they have a watch interval. Alright, this is when we haven't gotten to this yet. I should probably wait until we get to it. But I want to set up all of my configuration at once. As you can see, it says output save. Save is a library function that can be called from within the user-defined rules when you specify a user-defined function. And when you do that, all of the data for the request that the rule is being processed against is actually prepended to an output file. So I'm going to enable it. I'm going to, alright, so it's saved requests.txt. And these file names and paths, I mean, they could be absolutely anything that you like. I'm just trying to be consistent with the placeholder, but I mean, it seems like good sane defaults. I'm going to copy that file name and create the text file, because all of the files and directories that we point to need to exist. The add-on intentionally does not create them for you, because that could lead to bad things if bad paths were entered. Alright, so it's enabled, it has a path, and the maximum number of saved requests. If you set this to 0, it'll just allow the output file to grow without any kind of limitation or restriction. It can get as large as you like. If you set the maximum number, then, if it's 10, then, if the save gets called 11 times, then the first one gets pushed out, and, it doesn't grow past having 10 records in the output file. So that's just a way to make sure that it doesn't grow and take up your entire hard drive and break the internet. Alright, so that looks alright. And back to here, we're just going to create an empty text file having that name. And while we're here, I'm going to create a downloads directory. And the reason for that is this next one, path to download directory. I'm going to show you a preference, a dialog window in a bit, where basically anything that's been written to this output file is displayed in a list where each list item, each saved request has a checkbox next to it, and you can cherry pick which ones you want to rerun using an external tool, for example, wget. And there's two options when you do this. wget supports, its command line allows you to specify a directory that you're going to save into, in which case all downloads occur silently to that directory, or you can interactively for each file that you want to replay. So for each replayed file, presumably you're downloading something. So for each one, it would show you a file picker dialog where you could identify the path to where the file is going to be downloaded, which is mostly useful if you're going to resume an interrupted download, so part of the file already exists and it's not necessarily in your default download directory, but you want to finish the download without having to delete it and restart it and cross your fingers. wget is just a much better tool for continuing a download than the browser's inbuilt downloader. Anyway, I'll get to all of that. Let's just continue in order, slowly. Alright, that was bad. Let me copy this. And I called it downloads. That looks right. Alright, path to the wget executable. This is a default, which seemed like a sane default. Linux systems tend to be pretty consistent across the board where you can find that, whereas Windows, it could be absolutely anywhere. But since I'm on Windows, I need to point it to where my wget executable is. And since I'm setting everything else up for portability, I'm going to just add the wget executable to here, wget.exe. I'm going to hit OK, but I need to move that file. So profile directory, moz-rewrite, wget. Back to here. So I unzipped that earlier, and it's sitting right here, which doesn't do me a whole lot of good. So I'm just going to move it, edit, cut, Firefox portable, data, profile, moz-rewrite. Beautiful, that should work. And this particular version, the 1.16, I've tested it pretty thoroughly and it works perfectly. It's a good version to use if you happen to be on Windows. Okay, so we had our downloads directory. We're pointing toward wget executable. All of the command line options, I'll just quickly. C means to continue a download that there may already be a partial file, but its size doesn't match the content length that the server says it is. So it just it resumes. It tells the server to start at a certain point and to give it the rest of the data starting from there. ND, no directory. So when this is processed, there's an additional option that's added, which is the dash, I think it's dash big O, I want to say. Yeah, which dash big P, yes, the path. So it interpolates this, so because it needs to figure out what the prof D is, convert it to an absolute path, and then it passes the dash big P and then that absolute path as an additional option. So we don't want to create any additional directories inside of that path. We simply want the file that's downloaded to be downloaded to this path, unless, as I said earlier, and I'll show you that I'll show you in a bit, unless interactive the interactive file path file picker is being used, in which case instead of dash P it uses dash little o, I believe, which basically just passes the complete absolute path to the file itself rather than the directory. Anyway, content disposition, that is used so that if the server sends a content disposition response header, which would have a file name, a pretty file name, because the URL could be long and ugly and gibberish and not really have what the file name should be. So content disposition usually would have a pretty file name. So we use this option to tell wget to inspect that header, and if it's present, to save to this, by default, to save to this directory, but to save the file name based on the content disposition header. No HTTP, keep alive. I've just excuse me. I personally had some bad experience with trying to download lots of files sequentially from a single server using wget, where it'll download the first few, and then for some reason one will not, one will end with some kind of error, and it's boiled down to this. So I just always pass this option. It's far more important to me that my download complete than it be a little bit optimized. That's great for a browser. It's not particularly great for a download tool. Don't care. No check certificate. If you're downloading a file from HTTPS, I don't really care if their certificate is valid or not. So that's why when I moved wget, I didn't even copy any of its certificate authorities or anything like that. I just basically, if I gave it a path, I just want the file. Robots off. Sometimes if you're, I guess that is more important when you're using wget to mirror a page and download all of its prerequisites is the term that they use. So if, for example, you're downloading an HTML file and you want to download all of its prerequisites, that would mean all of its CSS files, JavaScript files, images, etc., etc. In which case, I don't know, sometimes if the server has a robot exclusion rule, that would prevent those files from being seen by Googlebot. We still want to download them. Progress indicator. When you actually run this tool, it opens basically a shell that wget is running inside of, and while wget is running, you see its standard output, standard error, and so this just it has lots of different options for how it displays its progress, and the default one I don't like at all, so .binary, I think, makes it a very intuitive progress indicator. Alright, so everything is set up now. Alright, so we have our watch on both of our input files. So let's quickly switch over to our text editor. Is this 7-zip? Yeah, I don't even need 7-zip anymore. Data. Oh, wrong one. Firefox data profile. Let's rewrite. Okay, so we want to be editing these two files. Just going to drag them into Notepad. Let's start with requests. Actually, before I get to the recipes, let's just do a few really, really basic ones. I'm going to go back to the GitHub repo here. I'm pretty sure I give some simple examples. Yeah, here we go. Well, something, let's just confirm what I said and just run the whole thing. So this is a request example. And so all that we're doing here is there's 3 rules, as it says. So this is a regex that pattern matches everything. And so since headers is returning an array rather than a function, well, not returning, its value, and it's not an array, it's an object, but okay, so key 1 is, header 1, header 2, header 3. So we're adding each of these, assigning each value. So any request is, these headers are added to it. And if it's a secure request, if it starts with HTTPS, case insensitive, then we remove, this isn't actually removed as soon as it's processed. Basically, all of the rules are evaluated until either stop is true or, just the array of rules has been fully processed, in which case, when it's done, it has a list of basically an array that looks pretty much exactly like this, and the value is either going to be a string, in which case it'll add or edit the value of this header to the request, since we're processing the requests. If it's false, then it just skips that value, that header altogether. So if it's in the original request, it stays there. If it was only a figment of the rules file, so for example, I think it's rule 2. Yeah, so for example, this rule adds this header 2. No, I'm sorry, header 3. This rule adds header 3, so it assigns a value to it. If hypothetically we're doing an insecure request, so this rule doesn't match at all, so only this rule and this rule are evaluated. So this one sets a value for header 3, but when this one here overrides it, so the end result is that the value is going to be false. So since this header 3 presumably isn't in the original request, false simply means don't do anything. It just ignores that header altogether. The other option is if this value is null. What that would mean is that we set it here, we override it here. The end result is that it's going to have the value null. And if the original request did have a header 3, we're going to remove it. Whereas if it's false, it would stay there, and we simply wouldn't do any, we wouldn't touch it. Okay, so I'm going to save this file, and let's load a page that allows us to see the request headers. There's lots of web type services that do that sort of thing. I'm going to pick one here. So a site called JSON Test, they have a subdomain called headers, and it lets you choose what MIME type you want to return it in. So one, I believe, is JSON. And so here we are. We have header 1, hello, header 2, bar, and there is no header 3. That's what we wanted, right? The assertion, yep, hello bar. So just to recap, header 1 was originally foo because this rule matched, this rule did not match, this rule did match, and so it overrode the value of header 1 to be hello. 2 continued to be bar, and 3 was assigned false, which ultimately meant that it was ignored. So hello bar. Okay, so that's a really simple example of requests. Let's look at our recipes and see what we have. Okay, this one should be fun. Redirect search engine queries from Yahoo to Google. I'm just gonna use it verbatim. I'm just gonna copy the whole thing and move over requests. Just delete all of that, paste it, save. So what we're doing here, it's a case-insensitive regex. Apparently Yahoo's, when you're searching Yahoo, it starts HTTP. Alright, so it can be secure, it can be insecure, it's either way. Alright, go to search.yahoo.com, and basically it's looking for a query string parameter p equals, and then a query, and then it just plops it into, it constructs a different URL where google.com/search, instead of p equals, it's q equals, and it just uses the same search term. And then it calls the library function, library helper function, redirect to, which just is essentially the same as if in the browser, for example, you recall window.location equals, you're just passing it a string, and the string has a URL. Okay, so let's test this. We've already saved it. Our watch is on, so it should have already processed. Can we change this to Yahoo? Choose your default search engine. Okay, so it defaults to Yahoo. Not sure why the drop down isn't working. Anyway, open a new tab. Oh, we changed the interface again. Not a fan. Anyway, so that was a Yahoo search. But you can see we actually pulled up results from Google. Hello world. And if you don't believe that that's what just happened, let's go to yahoo.com. Okay, so we plugged in Howdy Neighbor directly into the Yahoo search bar, and sure enough, we're seeing the results on Google. So that's kind of awesome, I think. In any case, it's a good example of how redirect to works. So you're intercepting, you set a pattern that you want to inspect, and you're in a function. So it's totally conditional. You have access to tons of information about the request besides just its URL. Let's actually go in and take a quick peek at all the contextual information. So we're processing requests right now. So there's a variable called request, and it's a hash. One of its attributes is window location, which is itself a hash, and pretty much the same. All of these keys in this hash are going to be repeated across anything that basically represents a URL. So window location is the page. If you're loading a web page, like, well, let's just redo this. So window location is going to be, in this context, google.com, this whole URL right here. Now, when this page loads, it has, tons of CSS files and JavaScript files and things like that. So if you were to set, you could window location always references this. So if you want to do things that happen for every element of the page that's being downloaded from this page, then you can say if window location equals something, then do something else. If, however, you only want to conditionally modify requests for particular CSS files, and you don't care if it's coming from, if its window location is Google or Craigslist or Yahoo or anywhere else, it's just for all CSS files I want to do something, then you would only care about the URI of the file that's being requested rather than the current window location. Within Mozilla, there's URI and there's also original URI. This has to do with, I believe this has to do with redirects. So, if you request a URI and the server returns a location header that redirects it to someplace else, which could potentially return another location header or a permanently redirected, or I don't know, there's a whole mess of headers, but let's just say a location header. So, if it bounces around quite a bit, ultimately when you get to the file you want, the original URI is what the page requested, the URI is where it was actually found. So both of those are there if you want them. Refer, it's basically going back to our Google example. If you just type in google.com, refer is going to be empty. When the page loads, for all of the CSS, JavaScript files, etc., that fire off as the page is loading, so the CSS request is going to say that the refer is this, and if that CSS file, for example, has an include, add include, or embed, if it itself references other things, or if it has a URL background image that has a URL, then when that image file downloads, its refer is going to be the CSS file. So it kind of snowballs. Request method, that's typically going to be get or post. Request headers, that actually just contains two things, unmodified and updated. Unmodified is what you could potentially care about. So within the function, you can reference this and access directly any request headers that the browser would have sent. And request.headers.updated is, it starts off empty, and as the rules are processed, this kind of describes it, but as the rules are processed, it's kind of a growing, I was describing it earlier actually, this is the one that contains, for each header that you either want to add, edit, or update, it's going to have one single key that, if you have a subsequent rule that modifies that, then it simply updates the value in this hash. And when all the rules have been processed, then it's the value that's in this hash that gets basically walked through, and each key is applied to the actual request stream. And the same logic applies to responses, but right now we're only speaking of requests. Let's see, request only. Alright, then we get into responses. We'll get to that in a bit. And helper functions. Well, first let's do an example of... Actually, this was an example of a function. Alright, so redirect to, for example, is a helper function. So along the same lines, some functions are always available, some are only available to requests, some are only available to responses, although I don't think there are any right now. So A to B is base64 decoding. This is an alias for A to B. So you pass it a base64 encoded string, and it outputs that string decoded from base64. B to A, base64 encode is an alias for B to A. So you pass it a regular string of binary data. You can pass anything, and it'll base64 encode it for you. Then a whole bunch of crypto functions, generating hashes if you want to. All of these are hash function generators. You pass it a string, this one will generate an MD2, MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, 384, SHA-512. Whether or not you have any need for it, it's nice to have. Okay, both requests and responses save. This is, if you remember in the preferences, save. So anytime that you call this, it prepends some information to your output file, assuming it's enabled. Alright, and the record will be available for replay via the View Replay Saved Requests dialog window. I'll show it to you real quick. It's empty right now since we haven't saved anything. So this top section is empty. When there's actually information there, it'll expand out and show you the full, nice long URL with a checkbox next to each. We'll see that momentarily. As far as the control fields and widgets, they're always present. Basically, this here is a drop-down list of the download tools that are available. Right now it's just wget. So if I was to click this, it's really not going to do anything because there are no requests that are selected. In fact, there are no requests at all. But if there were, then when I click this, it would begin downloading them. As far as its behavior, how it's going to download them. These two checkboxes can modify that. Interactively identify each partial incomplete download file. I'll come back to this and show it to you, but I spoke to that earlier. If you're using wget and you uncheck that, and you have say 5 URLs that you check, and you start wget, bam, it'll just begin to download them automatically to your default download directory. If, however, you were to check that, then for each one it would open a dialog and ask you to please choose where the file is in your file system, or you can manually type in a path if it doesn't already exist, if it's not a partial download and you just simply want to quickly type a path yourself. Fallback behavior when cancel is chosen in the interactive dialog. So if you have this checked and you check 5 checkboxes for 5 different URLs, say the first 3 are already on the hard drive, you select it, it resumes them, then the 4th one that it asks you to find a path to, you say to yourself, oh, I changed my mind, I don't want to download that. Well, actually, this here is what to, if you either close the dialog without choosing something, or if you click cancel, then if this is checked, then it will proceed with the download and save it to the default directory. Whereas if it's unchecked, then it won't download it at all. It will just skip that one particular URL and not download it. So, I didn't know which way to go, so I just figured I'd give the user the option. I didn't want to hard code one choice over the other. Anyway, we'll come back to that. Requests only, redirect to, and cancel. So redirect to is what we were just doing, with our silly example of redirecting all Yahoo queries to Google. And cancel, there's a recipe that speaks to this, this lightweight ad blocker. I was just having kind of fun with it. There's 2 examples here that use the same patterns, but they use them differently. This first rule matches everything, absolutely everything. And let's see, we're using the AdBlock plus easy list, just kind of, which is incredibly long and ridiculously long. But I'm just using the first 5 rules in it, just as an example of how it could be applied. So, oh shoot, pause. Okay, sorry about that. This guest image of Windows 7, the trial on it expired, so it shut down on me. So I just had to restart, but we're back to where we were. So we're looking at easy list. Let's see if the first 5 rules have changed between now and when I did this. Add box, add channel, class, add box, channel, class ID, height and keyword. Height, keyword. No, so it's all the same. Alright, so presumably it's looking for query string parameters that start with these things. So query string parameters are in the URL. Oh, URI. So it's in the full href. So basically what we're doing is we want a string. We want to generate a regular expression from a string. So we just want to combine a whole mess of patterns. So we start with an empty array. We push, regex pattern 1, regex pattern 2, regex pattern 3. And then we basically join them together to create a single string that's a regex pattern. So we want to OR them. All the patterns join with the OR, and wrap that in a parentheses, but you don't want any kind of capture groups. So anyway, so that's a string, and then we generate a regular expression from that string, case insensitive. Although realistically it doesn't need to be case insensitive, because there's a hidden preference as to whether or not the add-on automatically treats the URL as lowercase, and by default it does. So it normalizes all of, href would be all lowercase, and all of the other attribute of, all of these URI, window location, original URI, etc. They're all lowercase. So this is really not necessary, but I just did it anyway. This is only for illustrative purposes. So we generate a regular expression, and then we do pattern.test, so regular expression.test, and we pass it the string of the URL, request.uri.href, which, going back to here, so request.uri, and it has all those same things. So these are all the keys that it would have. So href is the full URI, which, should be familiar. It's the same thing as window.location.href, basically. Tried to follow more or less the same attribute naming conventions. Alright, so if it matches, which is to say that if this URL, the full URL that's being requested, that this rule is being matched against, contains this, or this, or this, or this, then call cancel. So, this is basically an add block. I mean, it is an add block. If this was to contain every single rule that's in easy list. Actually, I have a version. There's a different add-on called Add Block Lite that doesn't. It's a much shorter list, and I wrote up a version of this that uses that, and I'll probably update the recipe at some point in the near future, so it has that also. Anyway, so we call cancel. The problem with this methodology is that this URL is always matched, so this function always runs. So all of the work that's being done here to generate this regular expression happens each and every request. That's not ideal. All of this work could be done ahead of time, which is what this next one does. Basically, this string, that all of this here, all of this serves to create, it assigns the string here. We just do that in advance. And so this URL, this rule only runs when it matches this regular expression. This regular expression is the ORed combination of all of those individual things from the easy list. This, this. And so if it passes this test, if this rule does match, then we know that we want to cancel it, and there's really no additional work that needs to happen. You just call cancel. As far as returning an empty object goes, I always do that just because it's headers is supposed to return an object, so I always just return an empty one. But It doesn't have to. If it doesn't return an object, the script is smart enough to say that the return value is either undefined or invalid. Don't do anything with it. And since the other advantage with this is that since we know up front that when this matches, that it's a done deal. We've canceled it. We can stop processing rules. We can add a stop attribute true. Because this one matches everything. And within the logic here, we have to do a whole mess of conditional logic to know whether or not we're going to cancel it. There's no way ahead of time to say that we're going to stop it or not, unless we were to redo a whole the same logic. That's actually the one thing that's kind of on my to-do list. I want to add a library function that you can call from within here that will, assign the value of stop, but that doesn't currently exist. Okay, so just for fun, let's play with this. I'm going to get rid of this first rule. They both do the same thing, obviously, but well, I'll tell you what. Since we're testing, let's run the same test on both. We'll comment out the first one. And so right now, the only rule in play, you can see everything is a comment except for this. So if I hit save, oh, whoops. Let's move this over. The add-on's configured to look to the responses file. So actually, let's clean this up a little bit. Let's just take that. Okay, I just undid those changes since, this is not the file that the script is looking at. It's just the original. I'll just copy from it and paste into the other data file. Okay, so right now this rule should be active. So let's just test it out. So, we just loaded this. So let's change the URL a little bit. It's actually interesting that these patterns require that it be an ampersand. So for example, it wouldn't work if we were to do that. And by not work, I mean the page will load. So let's do that, and the page loads just fine. Now, if, however, we were to say A equals B, and since this is the pattern here that it's looking for, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to open a new tab, and this should not load. Alright, the demo gods are not with me right now. Okay, I don't know, let's take a look at this. Let's turn on debugging. So these two, case sensitive and debug, are preferences that are not available through the preferences dialog. They're quote unquote hidden. All of these other ones are editable through that preferences dialog. The requests enabled is the checkbox. The rules file path is that path to the requests, etc., etc. So I just turn on debug, and so anytime one of the preferences is changed, it's going to write to the browser console, just like that. Interesting. Well, first things first, let's turn off everything and only turn back on JavaScript log. Let's clear this. I'm just going to make a minor change to a preference just so it reloads. And where did my browser console go? So you can see there's a ton of debug logging within the code itself, but when that hidden preference is false, it's all circumvented and none of it actually occurs. By turning it on, we get to see a glimpse into pretty much every step of the way. So this is our request. It's the redirect from Yahoo to Google. So response. Here's an interesting thought. What if what if it's cached? Is that even a possibility? See, I'm not logged into anything. Okay, my browsing history. Well, that's interesting. Cancel is not defined. Okay, well, this was tested in the eval version. This is actually the first time I'm testing it in the eval and sandbox version. I wonder why cancel wasn't correctly added to the sandbox. Okay, I'm going to pause this and dig into the code real quick. Actually, it's just dawned on me, and anybody watching this is probably already screaming at the screen that I made a really stupid mistake. It's not a problem. It's pilot error. Let me clear this, shut it, go back to configs, and just turn off debugging because I don't need it. And the reason that you're screaming at the screen is because this is a request recipe, not a response recipe. Let's get that out of there and move over to the requests file. So instead of the other recipe that redirects from Yahoo to Google, we're going to put that there. And the reason for that is because cancel, as the documentation says, helper functions always available, both requests and responses, save. Request only, cancel. That's why it's not defined. I had the rule in the wrong place. Alright kids, this is what not to do at home. Alright, so now this file saved, the watch is on. So if I try to load this now, nothing. Perfect. That's what we wanted. And what were some of the other rules? Well, see, we're using the add keyword equals. So let's give it a value. Obviously, it doesn't matter if there's a value or not. But right now, we have the and. So if hypothetically we were to, if that was the first query string parameter, this will load. Whether or not it should is, debatable. But this right now does not match the pattern, so this will load. But as soon as you add that ampersand, that and, it's early, sorry. Nothing. So it's working. Now let's do a fun. Let's just change this a little. Let's the old cloud to but. Anytime we see cloud in a URL, let's cancel it. So cumulonimbus. Let's not include the word cloud, but we want, for example, let's click on that. Nothing, because you can see that the URL contains the word cloud. So clicking on it takes us nowhere fast. We can, this one here should load. I'm just going to open a new tab because I don't want to be going back and forth. Alright, so this one here does load, but this one here is just going to sit there and do nothing. Because somewhere in here, yep, has the word cloud. So that's kind of cool. Anyway. So those are the two request recipes, and now we can take a look at responses. So we have one that allows cross-origin resource sharing. which is a way to work around the same origin rule, both for AJAX requests as well as accessing fonts on external servers, etc., etc. Disable content security policy. Let's start with this. This is a fun one. Well, fun. It's a useful one. Let's close that. Let's just move over here. This particular recipe was written with a JSON viewer in mind. That's happened to be the use case. Let me show you why. I actually already loaded an example. It's gone right now. Let me bring it back. Okay, so this is where it just simply shows us our request headers in a JSON format, and page info should be application JSON. Yep. But we don't have any kind of JSON viewer add-on right now. So first things first, let's add one, and I'll show you the problem, and I'll show you how this rule fixes it. I'm going to use just my own JSON viewer because I like it. Alright, version 112. The one on ammo is actually a little bit behind right now, so I'm just going to load it from here. Woo. Okay, I tell you what, it's on ammo. It's not published yet, but that's version 1.04 actually, which is way old. Let's go down to version information. That version 1.12, I think it was, is actually, it's here. It's pending review. Okay. I don't know what the deal is with GitHub, but in any case, alright, so now we have a JSON viewer. Close that. See. Alright. So you can see the difference before, well, JSON viewer options. Not that this is a tutorial on that, but the theme by default is Solarized Dark. There's also Solarized Light. I mean, there's tons of options, but just case in point, I personally prefer dark. If you turn it off, it doesn't actually disable the add-on. What it does is it passes it through JS Beautify and loads it in a pre-tag. So it looks a little bit different when it wasn't there, but yeah, this looks more similar to what it was without the add-on. But we want the add-on to be in play. Okay, so let's see, what's a good, well, let me show it to you broken. It's just I should probably show it to you working before I show it to you broken. hold on one second, let me find the URL. Okay, so we're back on the GitHub repo for the JSON Viewer add-on. At the bottom there is a whole mess of example links, so let's just pick one of these. Picky. I don't know, it's just doesn't really matter. Alright, all I want you to see is these expand collapse icons. They're using an embedded font. It's packaged with the add-on. The font itself only has these two glyphs, the open and closed. The important thing though is that, let me show you a page where it doesn't work. GitHub itself actually, it's API. So we're going to look at the moz-rewrite repo, a list of all of the releases. And you can see garbage. The reason that you see garbage has to do with the fact that there's content security policy, really strict content security policy in the response header, which is blocking using, I believe that the font uses the data protocol, uses a data URI. Anyway, close that. Well, you'll keep this open as an example, because when we add a rule that fixes it, we'll reload it and it'll work. Let's rewrite. Yeah. Okay. So, content security policy. Just want to find a simple rule. Okay, this one here is good. It matches all URLs, and then it has a function, and it has a switch statement where it's looking at the content type of the response. Basically, the JSON viewer wants to run on anything that's application JSON, text JSON, text XJSON, and it'll inspect these other content types, but it'll only act on them if certain other circumstances are true. For example, if it's JavaScript, it's a JSONP callback, so it validates that the query string contains callback equals, and the response has, is basically calling a function for the name of the callback function. Plain is if you're looking at a file that's dragged from your local hard drive. It pretty much treats that as plain text, I believe, which is why there's additional. It'll look at it and make sure that it's JSON before it does anything. But those are the content types that the JSON viewer is inspecting. But because it inspects them, it actually, what this add-on sees, because of the way that JSON view registers itself to look at those streams, it converts it from one of these types, to that. And when you convert it to that, what you're actually converting it to is this. In any case, if it's this or it's these, then we want to remove these two, either either or both of these headers, content security policy or X content security policy. GitHub only uses this one, but I just included both. Otherwise, switch statement, default. Otherwise, don't do anything. So let's copy this rule over to our response rule set. Requests, responses, save. Okay, so I think it's on a 5-second wait. 1 potato, 2 potato. Let's reload and see what we got. Bam. How sweet is that? So what we just did is we simply conditionally, regardless of what the URL is, we were looking at the content type, and if the content type matches some criteria, we conditionally removed these headers from the response. That's a lot cleaner than saying, if the URL is GitHub, then do it. Because we don't really care if it's GitHub. We only care that, it's a JSON file. And we don't want, there's no reason to have strict content security on a JSON file. And more importantly, it breaks this add-on, because the add-on requires the ability to load a font from a data URI. Okay, while we're here, let's quickly look at these other ones. See, this matches a hash. Okay. The other option, this is actually a good way to go to, because the data viewer has a few of my add-ons. I don't know, I term them hash tokens. Basically, they can be separated by either slashes or commas after, as part of the hash, and so you can mix them and match them. And they can instruct the add-ons to either act or don't act. It's just a way of adding an additional explicit level of control. Let me show you. I'm going to take this rule and replace the other one with it. Okay, so what we're doing here is a URL has to have a hash. Basically it's just looking at the URL, does it have a hash mark and something after it. That's actually not the best regular expression to use. It's a little inefficient, because all that we're going to do is we're going to create another regular expression and test the URI's hash against it. So first let's run it as is, and then let's clean it up a little bit. Anyway, so we're creating a regex, we're testing the hash. If the hash matches our regular expression, which is to say if it contains JSON data view or it contains HTTP archive viewer, then we set the content type to application JSON, so we're normalizing it. So that's useful, if the server's sending a content type that's either incorrect or application octet or God knows what, or if they're using one of the newer media type content types that's something something plus JSON. You could use that. We're removing content disposition. That's mainly the archive viewer. Servers that serve up HAR files tend to add a content disposition to force you to download it. Want to ignore that, because when you're using a HAR viewer, you want the HAR to render in the browser rather than to be saved. And here's the same content security policies that we're removing. And so after we do that, this is not necessary per se, but if you have additional rules and you're updating the content type, headers, content type. Oh, that's interesting. I should really normalize those to lowercase. I think initially they were, and I actually changed that to make it pretty, and I forgot to change that. But alright, so if we're changing the header's content type, then we want to assign response.content type. This is one of those contextual variables. So this already had a value, but we're changing it. And the only reason we would care is if there's another rule, comma, another rule, and that rule may potentially want to look at. So if we've updated it here, it's just really being a good citizen to update it here. Passing it forward. Okay, so this being the case, let's test this. First things first, this won't work anymore. Not without manually, explicitly adding a hash to make it work. So if we reload, broken again. But, oh. And I'm gonna open this in a new tab so it doesn't just link to the anchor. Alright. So it's working again. Awesome. The upside to this, we're normalizing it to application JSON, right? Yeah. So here's a case in point, going back to that header example. Alright, mime type equals 1 is already JSON, so it's going to work. Mime type equals 2 is, I don't remember, but it's not JSON. However, we can force it to be. Nice. Okay, so, well, what's the last example here? Oh, I said I was going to clean this up a little bit. Instead of this, let's just do this. Okay, so this rule only matches if it has this hash or this hash. In which case, don't need another pattern, and we don't need to test that other pattern. Well, you get the idea. Sweet. So that works too. Okay, and the last example here is, okay, so if the content type, this is the those media type suffixes, so if it ends in plus JSON, then we want to normalize it. Yeah, let's test that out real quick. And we need a URL to test it against. I'm pretty sure there's one in this issue. Bear with me 1 second. Yeah, that's the guy. Sweet. So page info is showing this application JSON, but let's comment this rule out and see what happens. Because the only reason it's working and the only reason it's application JSON is because of what we're doing here. So now let me reload it. See what we have. It's changing its content type to application JSON. And once it's application JSON, the JSON viewer takes over and renders it. And that happens because the content type does in fact end with plus JSON. Anyway, where are our other recipes? Alright, so that's content security policy. Core is cross-origin resource. Alright, so what this rule is doing is it's saying if the window location, so the page that is in your browser, if it's protocol's file, so if you're loading it from your hard drive, or if its host is localhost, so you're running it from a local Apache server, a local web server, then always all responses coming from all, in response to all requests, add these headers that tell the browser that it's alright, we trust this. Let me give you an example. I'm not actually going to write a local file. I'm going to change this rule a little bit so it just works for all URLs. Let's say it's a response. So let's just take the payload, get rid of the if statement. Actually, let me start by showing you an example that doesn't work. And then uncomment that out and show you that it does. Here's a demo. I'm going to use jQuery to do a XHR request to some other site. So I don't have to be on jQuery's website, it's just jQuery's website definitely has jQuery loaded. So I'm just gonna use their JavaScript console. I should probably install Firebug. This is an ugly console. Something I'm gonna do that really fast. I'm gonna pause 1 second. Okay, just so here we are on Ammo's page for Firebug. Add it to Firefox. Install. Beautiful. Close that. Close that. And now we have our trusty JavaScript console. Okay, so here's an example that I came up with. And actually, let me show you where this comes from. This is just, so we're making a AJAX request to download something from Craigslist that's in RSS format, so it's an XML format. What I did to get that URL is pretty silly. I just went to SFA, Craigslist.org, jobs, search JavaScript. So here's your search results, and down here, here's the link. So just copy link location. And let me show it to you real quick. And if you do view source, this is what it actually looks like. So it's an XML document. This RDF wraps the entire page. So that's like the parent of everything, and then inside of that you have, they don't make it easy to read. See, channel goes from there to there, and then you have a series of items. Item 1, item 2, item 3, etc. So each of these has, the demo only cherry picks the title out of it. And inside of that you have a C data block. Okay, so I'm just going to minimize this real quick. Close that. That's the link for the XML file we're just looking at. And so XML, so success, it's going to get the XML document, console.log, and it's basically, you should just say that it's an XML document. However, if we run into a CORS issue, which we're going to because we're making a cross-origin request, we're just going to say error, and let's do status text, text status, which is what we're going to see, error, cross-origin request blocked, the same origin policy disallows reading, blah, blah, blah. This can be fixed by moving the resource to the same domain, or by enabling CORS. So that's what we're going to do right now. Where's our requests? Responses. So let's undo that comment. Save. And again, this is not what you want to do. You want to be very particular about under what conditions, under what circumstances you add these headers, because this is browser security and it's something to take seriously, but this is just a demo. And pause because Windows is shutting down again, the trial. Hold on. And we're back. Okay, so uncommented, this I was talking about, be careful. So now we're going to run it. So we have the same little demo that threw a CORS error last time, a cross-origin issue. So let's run it, and bam, this time we have ourselves a document. How sweet is that? And just for fun, let's change this demo. Well, yeah, super fast. I'll just show you a slightly different version. I just thought it would be fun to use jQuery to actually parse the response. So, same URL. All that's changed is, first of all, I changed this to text rather than XML, so I'm just taking the raw text and I'm going to parse it in jQuery myself. The error block is the same. text status. Error block is the same, the success block. So this time we're getting the text, just the raw text of that as data. The see data pattern is to take what's inside of a see data block. Let me show that again. So I'm going to be taking titles. Oh, whoops. Taking titles from items. Item title. So it's always within the see data block, so we're only interested in this part because that's the actual data. So I'm going to use a regular expression to extract it out, and that's where that see data pattern is. Okay, so we just assign jQuery to its standard $sign variable. The variable data equals, so we're passing the text of the XML. We're filtering it into, through the jQuery function and getting ourselves a single jQuery object, which, because of the structure of this document, it's going to refer to the RDF. So if we were to say length, it would say 1, because there's only one main DOM element, or node, I guess I should say. And then within that, it would have, for children, it would have channel, and then it would have a whole mess of items. And so items equals data.children item. So that's what we're doing. We're just filtering the children, only looking at the elements that are, items. And then for each, we get a jQuery object of that item element, and then we filter its children for the first title, and then we take the text out of it. So that text is going to be this entire thing right here, including the see data. And so we use that see data pattern, regex object, and we execute it against this title text. And if it matches and we have a capture block, it's going to be an array. Otherwise, if it doesn't match, it's going to be null. So if it's not null, then title equals, the 0 is the entire string, and element 1 is just this capture group right here, which is what we're interested in. And then console.log title. And so let's see what we get. Syntax error. That's not good. That's fun. Alright, what just happened? I don't know. In any case, this time, second time's a charm, I guess. This time it ran, and so it's, again, for every item, it just, in a loop, it extracts the title, and it console.logs the title. So that is every title in the RSS feed for every job in San Francisco that has JavaScript, matches the query for JavaScript. As far as the Craigslist API goes, I'm not sure how many results per, I don't know if there's a query string parameter that specs how many results it returns. But in any case, this is an example of cores, so it's not an example of Craigslist. Okay, so that's awesome. So that shows how to get around the same origin security policy for Ajax using jQuery. The same thing applies to, if you want to just write a local HTML file that's taking resources, it's, a mashup of resources, font files from one of your servers and some JSON data that lives on another server and some JavaScripts that run on another server. You can just mash it all up together, and if you add this rule, that limits the exception to only your own personal development files, it's useful in testing. I mean, something like this would be, I don't know, I'm not a security expert. I'm not going to get into a discussion of the pros and cons, but, security policies are in place for a reason, so be careful. That's all I'm saying. Alright, so that recipe is done too. Alright, and the last but not least is saving requests. This is awesome. Alright. This demo here, what am I doing? If it's greater than threshold is 100 megabytes, then save it. So let's do it. Gonna have to find a big download. I think I'll download a Linux distro. Alright, that's saved. Yeah, I'm going to pause the video and find a big ISO to download. Okay, so I'm on the Ubuntu download page. It actually automatically started an ISO download that I canceled. This link here is the download link. Because it automatically started it, and because this rule is in play, and because the file is larger than 100 megabytes, it's going to be listed here. Yes. So now is a good time to discuss what just happened. And, alright, first things first, let me show you, if you remember, let's go back to our preferences. So we have a output file, saved requests.txt. Let's open this up in Notepad and see what we have. So it's in Firefox, data, profile, moz-rewrite, where everything else is. And remember, this started, we manually touched this file. We made a blank text file that had this name. The add-on did not create this file for you, but because it was there, it wrote to it. And so what it is one line per request. The request itself is a JSON object that has a whole bunch of information. I mean, essentially, it has its method, it has its URL, it has its headers. If there's post data, that's there too. Oh yeah, it also creates a random ID value for it. That's really just internal to the add-on. That way, when it shows you a list of all the available requests, you're actually selecting it by ID, so that there's never any confusion. Order doesn't matter, and if between the time that you open your preference window, other things have been prepended to the file, you don't run into the situation of, the interface saying, download me the first request, but the first request is now the third request, anything like that. It uses unique identifiers. Oh, and it also adds a comma to the end, which this is all internal. A user shouldn't need to care about any of this. I'm just showing it to you. I'm actually going to delete this right now. Alright, so saved request is empty again. If I go to here, view your saved request, it's empty again. I just want to kind of be explicit about this. So I'm going to click on the ISO again, and I'm just going to hit cancel. I don't have to download it. It's a request rule. No, it's not. It's a response rule. Sorry. It's a response rule. Yeah, so we made the request. The server sent back a response that said, here's the content disposition, here's the name of the file, here's the content length. It's ginormous, and the browser opened a dialog to say where you want to save it to, and we said cancel, just stop it. But that was far enough down the road for our add-on to see that response and make a log of it. You see its ID's changed, it's just random. Let me minimize that. I don't need this page anymore. I guess I'll just save the link to my clipboard just in case. But, so now is a good time to... Okay. This downloads directory. Here, let me show you. Let me refresh your memory. Tools, preferences. And so this is where we save the output file. This is the default download directory. So if we do not use interactive downloading mode, when we replay a request, it'll automatically be saved to this directory, which is this directory, which again, manually created. It's empty right now. But let me just start downloading Ubuntu without any interactive file picking, and you'll see that it starts downloading here. Alright, so I do not want to interactively do it. I want to select this Ubuntu, and I'm going to start downloading it using wget. Okay, so there was no file. It started from scratch. It started from 0. Okay, now I'm just going to stop this. And you can see I've downloaded a little over 2 megs. It's a much larger file than that. So, oh shoot, this file download was interrupted. I want to resume it. I happen to have the dialog open right now, but let's start from get-go. Okay, so same deal. Unselect interactive, select Ubuntu, and select wget. And you'll see it skipping that 1920 kilobytes, and it's starting from there. So it's resuming. So that's awesome. And back to our directory here, it's refreshed its size from 2 megs to 5 megs-ish. So that's great. But, what if you don't want to, use this default download directory? Let me just delete this file. What if your workflow is that, you've, in your browsing, you clicked on this, and you said save file, and you saved it to portable apps. Let's just put it there. So you're using the browser's downloader, and so it's a little shy of a gig. And if I click this, it would actually cancel the download and clean up after itself. It would delete the file. So, pause. Okay, so I have that as a quote-unquote part file. Not sure. I'm just going to move it right now. So I'm going to cut. Just going to put it here temporarily. Paste. And tell Firefox to just cancel it. And clear my downloads. Okay, so I still have this part file. Let's get rid of that .part. Hopefully it's just, you know, the beginning 10 megs. And I'll just move it back over here just because that's a better place for it. Okay, so obviously you wouldn't have paused it and done all of that, but you know, pretend if instead of doing that the server stopped responding or your computer crashed or, you know, for whatever reason the download isn't all there when you test it. So let's go to replay. It's all the same stuff, but it really doesn't matter which one we do. But this time we do want to interactively identify it. And we want to keep this unchecked. You know, so if we close the dialog for whatever reason, we're just going to cancel downloading it. And so we're not in our default download directory. Our default download directory is here. So the file picker, we want to pick where, you know, the file that we want to continue downloading. And you can see that it's skipped, you know, 9 megs or so. So it's working, and it's downloading it to here. Let me refresh. See, so it jumped from 9 to 12, and the download's in progress. I'm just going to stop that. Close out that. And I'm going to delete Ubuntu. You know, it served its purpose. But, so that's replaying files. Is there anything else to discuss about that? Oh, whoops. No. So I showed you where to get wget. You can put it anywhere you like, but under prof D is good for portability. These good defaults. Default download directory versus interactive file picking. We discussed the maximum number of requests. Obviously, as you saw from the demo, that it doesn't have any kind of logic to, you know, identify duplicates. Whether or not that would even be a good thing or not is debatable, but you know, it boils down to the rules. If you make a request, and the server returns a response, and that response matches your criteria for whether or not to save it, it saves it. It prepends it to here, and you know, these are the URLs that are displayed to you in the preferences in the replay dialog, and you can cherry pick which ones you do want, and then you can download that subset to either anywhere you want or the default download directory. Well, I think I've covered just about everything. The only additional thing that may be worth mentioning is if you want manually editing this file, this saved requests file, let's just save it to a JSON file. Let's request JSON. And just drag this guy into the browser. Okay, so we have our method get, we have our URL, which is the ISO file itself. We have an ID, which if hypothetically you were to manually be doing this, you could just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't matter. We have our request headers. So the host, user agent, which just happens to be, I'm using Firefox 34. Our accept header, accept language, accept encoding, cookie. This is a clean install, so there's nothing I have to be worried about. UTM-A, UTM-B, C, Z, that's all Google Analytics. And connection keep alive, which when this gets passed to wget, there was a command line switch option that tells it not to use keep alive. But that's really, none of these headers are necessary. It's really only useful if there's if there's cookies for session, or you've jumped through a million hoops to reach a certain point where you're allowed to download a file, which would presumably be adding a ton of cookies, or maybe the refer needs to be set or the host needs to be set. But really, you could just manually add your method, add your URL, add a fake ID, and you should be good to go if you wanted to start tweaking that file yourself. But I don't see any reason that you would ever need to. Okay, so it's been 2.5 hours. Wow, I am sorry. Call me complete. Okay, I'm going to call it quits, and hopefully this has been enough of an introduction that you feel comfortable playing with these rules and adding rules and writing functions and using all of the various contextual variables that are available within these functions that you can inspect and conditionally write your logic against, if-then statements and all these helper functions. Okay, thanks for watching. Have a great day.